Phyllis, lots of people start out as anti-clericals and end up with religion. In your case, you seem to have always been consistent. You were always a consistent. Was this something that you learned, or could it have actually been in your own background, back in South Tipperary? I mean, that's not a place you associate with these views.
I lived in a rural area, and the priest lived in this massive wealth, relatively speaking. I mean, one priest, for example, that was a parish priest when I was a child. He used to tell us he had been to 20 Grand Nationals. Now, in those days, that was a very... Nowadays, everybody can afford to go to the Grand National. But in those days, that was a major outing, and of magnificent sort of great splendour, like part of the Grand Tour. And he used to boast he'd been to 20, and he saw nothing wrong with it, and indeed his parishioners didn't see anything wrong with it either. You see, they used to butter them up, like, for example, when that priest had his 60th wedding anniversary, people offered him an indoor toilet, and he said, ah, no. He said, sure, aren't I going up the Haggart all my life? So because he comes out with this little rural thing, they think, ah, she was a grand, humble man. The fact that he spent £100 going over to the Grand National didn't dawn on them, you see. They thought, a Grand Plain man, he'd be called. I never remember any part of my life where the religion which was preached to me was practiced. When I was a child, the first wake I ever went to, an old man had died. He died from a varicose ulcer which had bled during the night, and he had no help. I was watching, I was fascinated by a pattern of a blood stain on the floor, obviously, which was part of the hemorrhage the poor man had been left in all night. And it filled me with rage. I would have been about 5, so that's 50 years ago. And you can tell then how long ago that is. And that rage has never left me. Whether it is curing sickness, or having a roof over your head, or dying in comfort, nothing, there isn't anything that money can't buy. And I knew that couldn't be right. I mean, how could it be? This man had worked all his life for all the neighbours around him. And now there were we, sitting around him who had died like the wretched of the earth, as they say in the Bible.
Phyllis, Yeats taught Swift as having a savage indignation about hypocrisy and injustice. You've that kind of savage rage too, haven't you?
I have never shut up, given out, and I never will, because there is no reason for this great injustice at all.
Phyllis, can we just move from South Tipperary, which in some sense, you know, formed your personality, to London, when you went to London, which in some sense formed your politics? Was that when you became officially political, so to speak?
After I was in England, when I was down in a very dreary part of the country where I never met anybody, called Dartford in Kent, I'm not surprised I read that's where Margaret Thatcher met Dennis, it was a dreary place and only dreary people could have survived in it. And they even more so than most, he owned a paint factory, and they tell me the fumes of paint are very dubious results. But however, I left that then and I went back to London. I then got very interested in mainly in C&D, because the first fast food, the first glamorous food to come to the area of London was the Wimpy Bar, believe it or not. And Pat Arrowsmith, who was a member of the Committee of 100, lived just down the road, and she used to eat there, and occasionally I used to chat with her at the table having a cup of coffee. And then my children began to be born, and that kept me very occupied. Nevertheless, I did 2 marches to Bertrand Russell.
Would you think that was when you became a socialist, so to speak?
Yes, oh yes. You knew then. I mean, you saw the people who gave their lot. I wouldn't say it was when I was... Yes, I suppose I was utterly convinced of the rightness of socialism, of the right socialism, yes. It would be around the time.
The rightness of socialism would strike many people as a pretty provocative phrase, Phyllis, in the context of events in Eastern Europe. I mean, don't you see these events as an end of the things you believe in? I mean, or do you see them as a cause for hope somehow?
Oh, no, I think it's the beginning of everything great for socialism. I feel at the moment, I was looking the other night at people pouring across the wall from East Germany. Why couldn't they? They just want to come and have a look. They're pouring back. They're like me. I don't want to be restricted to a pub down the road. I want to wander along. If I go down the King's Road in London, when I first went to England and I went to see the most, what were called weird pubs, to look at them, I don't want to stop at the first one. I want to go to every one of them. But the minute I've got to the end of the road, I want to come back to the first one again. And eventually I'm back in Ireland again. And it's exactly the same with people in Eastern Europe. Human beings, as Emma Goldman says, they must have laughter in their lives. And the interesting thing about it is that all the Russians that I ever met, and I have met an awful lot of them, they're all very joyous people. And an awful lot in common with the Irish. And I could tell them, I always believe that one of the things that people have in common more than any other is humour. Humour is the great leveller. And we have an awful lot in common with the Russians in jokes and that. So I feel it's the beginning for socialism, because what people are going to find, they're going to find that joy is in freedom, and that freedom is in economic sufficiency. So I don't think that there is any question that Mr. Gorbachev hasn't got the right idea. Mr. Gorbachev is a man who wants people to sit in comfort and listen to Beethoven. And that's what I hope will happen.
Phyllis, many people would think it's a bit intrusive of me, a bit insensitive to come to somebody in your condition and start talking about politics and such questions. Do you consider it an intrusion?
Good Lord, no. Politics to me is from when eating, breathing, sleeping, being sick, being well, being happy. When we wake up in the morning, we have one of these little clock radios, and it wakes up at 6:30 to the BBC. And it starts off with politics. And then it is at that until we come over to our own radio station, and then it's at that until Gay Byrne or whoever at 9 o'clock, and then it's Pat Kenny, and then it's Marianne Finucane, and it's the news, and then there are lighter programs. But at whatever level, it's all politics. You cannot live. I mean, how would the country... I'm often irritated. I've changed a little lately. I used to, for example, often be frightfully anti the establishment politicians, because I suppose I was a bit jealous of them because they'd all got their people in and I couldn't get my people in. But it's changing now. I've got a few of my people in, or at least I've helped a little bit to get some of the people I like in. Of the establishment politicians who were in, say, the Pádraig Flynns and all of these people, it wasn't until I really put my heart into canvassing in this country did I realise that no doubt, the Pádraig Flynns of this world had to do that basic groundwork in the beginning. And having got in, by God, they're going to stay there, and good luck to them. I mean, I hope to remove them. But in the meantime, I appreciate, no doubt, that they have I was in the Hotel Federation for 4 years, and I met an awful lot of politicians, and I changed my mind about some of them.
I mean, you admire them to some extent,
I do. I
mean, it is a rotten job, isn't it?
It's a rotten job, and it's a very hard job, and I'm afraid I have to change. I used to, when I didn't know I was guilty of that, I was accusing them of being overpaid and underworked and all the rest of it. I can't say that that's the truth. I remember even being at a dinner with Mr. Wilson, the Minister of Tourism, way up in Donegal, and assuming he was going to bed in the hotel where the function was, where we were, but he was driving down to Wexford or Waterford or wherever. Well, I know it was driving down in a car or whatever. I mean, who wants to drive from Donegal to Waterford? I don't think that I met a politician that I could say didn't earn his keep from this country.
Earn his keep. Even though in some sense you think that they
of course, in the other hand, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't agree with them politically. What they're going to bring up at the end is not what I want. I would say a lot of it was wasted, but they're still men.
Your